be doing Unit 9, Notes 11. So we are going to be talking about dividing rational expressions. So today we're going to learn to simplify, multiply, and divide, and we're still going to also be calculating out those excluded values at the same time. So it's going to be a lot of things in one place, so just kind of bear with me here. So first of all, when you are dividing rational expressions, remember when you divided fractions, okay? When you divided fractions, you needed to multiply by the reciprocal. So that means you're going to flip the second expression and multiply. So that's what we're going to be kind of working on today, is that concept. So let's go ahead and let's take a look. So first of all, I see that this is being divided. So first thing I check is if I can simplify anything out to start off with the two fractions, and I can't. So when I multiply by the reciprocal, what's going to happen is my first fraction, oh, that's showing up real nice, isn't it? Okay, so my first fraction, 5x squared over y, is going to stay the same. Then I'm going to flip my second fraction. Okay, and it's going to look like that. So now I like to do a little bit of simplifying of the numbers in advance, okay? So when I look at these numbers, I see 10 and I see 5. The more earlier I simplify, the easier the simplifying actually is. So 10 and 5 are both divisible by 5. So what I do is I divide this by 5 and I get 2. And I divide that by 5 and it cancels out to 1. So I don't even need it. So now I can multiply across. So I'm going to have 21 on top and then x squared. And then on the bottom, I always write my numbers first. I'm going to write 2, and then I'm going to have x cubed, and then I'm going to have y. So now I need to simplify this, and the only thing left for me to simplify is that x squared divided by x cubed. Now we're subtracting the exponents, and we're left with x to the first. Remember when we subtract exponents, that wherever the larger amount of exponents, that's where our answer needs to reside. So when my x to the first needs to go on the bottom because x to the third is our larger. So we have 2, and then we have x to the first on the bottom, and then y. So then this right here is our simplified monomial. Now we need to find our excluded values. So this gets kind of tricky. So to find our excluded values, we have to take from a couple of places. So first, we need to take what was on the bottom of the original fraction and say, okay, that cannot be equal to 0. Then we need to take what was on the bottom of our original and say, okay, that cannot be equal to 0. Now, because when we multiplied, we flipped, look what now is on the bottom. So we also, when we find our excluded values, have to take the top of that second fraction, because when we divide, we're going to be flipping it down to the bottom. So also 10x cubed cannot be equal to 0. So y cannot be equal to 0? Well, 21 is never going to be equal to 0, so I can throw that out. And 10x cubed, the only way 10x cubed is going to be equal to 0 is if x is equal to 0. So our two excluded values are that y cannot be equal to 0 and x cannot be equal to 0. So let's take a look at number 2. So I check, I can't do any simplifying to start off with, so I'm just going to jump right in. So I'm going to have 15y squared divided by 4x. Now because that second fraction is being divided, I need to flip it. So 8x cubed is going to come on top, and 5y is going to go on the bottom. Now I can cancel some stuff out here, which is just delightful. So what I can do is I can cancel out this 15 with the 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3. 8 divided by 4 is 2. Since it's all being multiplied, we can go across the fractions to eliminate what we can. So then on top, we're going to take 3 times 2, which is 6. And then I have x cubed y squared up top, and then I have xy on the bottom. So now I need to go through and simplify. Well, nothing's going to happen with that 6. That 6 is going to stay as is. Then I have x cubed divided by x to the first. Subtract those exponents and I get x squared. Y squared divided by y to the first. Subtract those exponents and I get y to the first. So my simplified answer is 6y to x squared y to the first, or just 6x squared y also works. So now we need to calculate our excluded values. Now when we do that, we need to take our original bottom of the first fraction, which is 4x, so 4x cannot equal 0, our original bottom, and our original top of the second fraction. So also 8x cubed cannot equal 0, and 5y cannot equal 0 as I run out of space. So the only way that 4x is going to be equal to 0 is if x itself is equal to 0. So x cannot be 0. And the only way that 5y is going to be equal to 0 is if y is equal to 0. So my two excluded values are that x cannot be 0 and y cannot be 0. All right, taking a look at number 3, I want to see if I can simplify a little bit in advance before I start, and I can. So I take a look at this fraction, and I have 28 over 7. Well, 28 divided by 7 is 4. So that's going to become 4x squared divided by y to the 5th. The earlier you simplify, the easier it is. However, if you need to, you can simplify later. It's just going to have to deal with bigger numbers, so it might take you a little bit longer. So then we have 21 divided by 35. Well, 21 and 35 are both divisible by 7. So 21 divided by 7 is 3, and 35 divided by 7 is going to give you 5. So then up top, when we multiply now, 5y cubed is going to come up to the top, and 3x to the 8th is going to come to the bottom. And remember that I got 5 and 3 because I simplified, okay? So let's go ahead and let's take a look at multiplying these out now. So I can do 4 times 5, which is 20, and then I have x squared, y to the 3rd, divided by, I'm going to bring that 3 out front, x to the 8th, y to the 5th. So now I need to simplify some of my expressions. So 20 over 3 is not going to simplify. Then I have x squared divided by x to the 8th. So when I subtract them, I'm going to end up getting x to the 6th. Now x to the 6th is my larger exponent, so x to the 6th is going to go on the bottom. And then I have y to the 3rd divided by y to the 5th. Subtract those out and I get y squared. And so then y squared is on the bottom. Okay, because that's what the larger amount of x's is. Now we need to go and we need to calculate out our excluded values. So we need to take our original bottom. Our original bottom was 7y to the 5th. So 7y to the 5th cannot equal 0. Our original top was our original bottom of the second fraction was 35y cubed, and that cannot be equal to 0. And our original top of the second fraction, remember we have to do that one as well, is 21x to the 8th, and that cannot equal 0. So now we need to go ahead and calculate these out. Well, the only way that these two are going to equal 0 is if y itself is equal to 0. So we'll cancel that out. The only way that this one's going to equal 0 is if x itself is equal to 0. So we'll cancel that out. So those are our two excluded values, that y cannot be equal to 0 and x cannot be equal to 0. Okay, taking a look at number 4, let's try and simplify in advance again. So we can simplify this one by taking out 24 divided by 4 is going to give me 6. So I'm going to have 6, and then I have x to the 6th divided by x to the 7th. So when I subtract those exponents, I get x to the 1st. And x to the 1st needs to land on the bottom because that's where the larger amount of x's is. And then I have 16 divided by 8, and I'm just going to write out another division step just so I can get things going. 16 divided by 8 is 2. X cubed divided by x squared is x to the 1st, and that x to the 1st is going to go on top because that's where the larger amount of x's is. Now my bottom went away, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 there so that I know that my bottom existed at some point. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is I am going to flip that second fraction. So I have 6 divided by x times 2, we need to flip the second fraction. Come on, Humbert. So that 1 is going to come to the top, and the 2x is going to flip to the bottom. So now when I multiply that out, I get 6 divided by 2, and then x to the 1st times x to the 1st is x squared. So now I can do the 6 divided by 2, and that's going to give me 3 up top, but then my x squared needs to reside on the bottom. So that's my simplified rational expression right there, is 3x squared. So taking a look at our excluded values, okay, so we need to take our original bottom of the first fraction, which is 4x to the 7th, and that cannot be equal to 0. And then the original bottom of the second fraction is 8x squared, that cannot be equal to 0. And the original top of the second fraction, 6x squared, 16x cubed, cannot be equal to 0. Well, each of these are x raised to an exponent, and they're all being multiplied. So the only way that any of these are going to be equal to 0 is if x itself is equal to 0. So that's my excluded value, is that x cannot be equal to 0. All right, let's take a look at number 5. So we need to simplify some of these out. Now I can't simplify out any of the fractions right now, or kind of a little bit. I can take this d squared and divide it by d. And when I do that, I get d to the 1st. So I get 27c cubed d to the 1st power divided by 11. Then there's nothing I can simplify in this second fraction, so I'm going to go ahead and multiply and flip it. So when I multiply and flip it, then we're going to have 9d cubed e up top divided by 2c cubed on the bottom. So now I need to go ahead and I need to multiply across. Well, 27 times 9 is going to give me 243. Now, I have C, D, and E up top. C, D, and E cannot be combined with each other because they're all different letters. So I have C cubed, D cubed, and then I have E. On the bottom now, I have 11 times 2, which is 22, divided by C cubed. So now I need to go and simplify this out. So I notice that I have C cubed over C cubed. Well, those C cubes are going to cancel out. So we have 243 up top, and then D cubed, and then E, and then on the bottom, since our C cubed canceled out, all we have left is 22. So this right here is our final simplified version. Now we need to find our excluded value. So we're going to take our original top, which is 11D, and say, okay, that can't be equal to 0. Take our original bottom of the second fraction, 9D cubed, E cannot equal 0, and our original top of the second fraction, 2C cubed, cannot equal 0. Well, the only way that 11D is going to equal 0 is if D itself is equal to 0. And then we have 9D cubed E. And the only way that D, well, we already know that D cannot be equal to 0, but if E was equal to 0, that would multiply to 0. So we now need to say that E cannot be equal to 0. Likewise, 2C cubed cannot be equal to 0, so that means that C cannot be equal to 0. So this right here is our final answer for number 5. So then we have 36 divided by 6, and that's going to give us 6. Divided by C squared divided by C cubed over here, that's going to leave us with C to the first, and that's going to be on the bottom, and then we have D cubed left on top. Now I'm going to leave this as division so we can simplify that second fraction. 48 divided by 12 is going to give me 4, so I'm going to have 4 up top, and then D squared divided by D cubed, that's going to leave me with D to the first on the bottom. So now I'm ready to multiply this. So I'm going to flip it over, so I have 6D cubed times C, and I'm going to flip that second fraction. And now I need to multiply. So 6D cubed times D to the first is going to give me 6D to the fourth, divided by 4 times C, which is 4C. So the last thing I need to do is reduce that fraction. 6 and 4 are both divisible by 2. So then I end up getting 3D to the fourth divided by 2C. And this is my simplified rational expression. So now I need to go about calculating out my excluded values. So to get my excluded values, I need to take first the original bottom of the first fraction. So 6C cubed cannot equal 0. Original bottom of my second fraction, 6D to the third cannot equal 0. And original bottom of my top, 48D squared cannot equal 0. So then here I get that C cannot be 0 and D cannot be 0 because that's the only way that those values are going to equal 0. All right, let's take a look at some of these factored ones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and see if there's any factors I can cross off to start off with. And remember, it has to be in the same fraction. So of the first fraction, I can cancel out those x minus 2's. And that's all I can do right now. So now I'm going to flip to multiplying. So of that first fraction, I have x plus 3 times x minus 4. Now I'm going to flip this second fraction and then multiply it. So I get x minus 4 divided by x plus 3. Now that is all being multiplied, which means I can cancel out fractions. And when I do, I cancel out everything. And when everything cancels out, that doesn't mean that I get 0. It actually means that I have 1. So now we need to go ahead and calculate out our excluded values. So what we do know is that x minus 4 times x minus 2 of our original fraction cannot equal 0. We also know bottom of our second fraction, x minus 4 cannot be equal to 0. And also from the top of our second fraction, x plus 3 cannot equal 0. So now we need to figure out how many parentheses. So we know x minus 4 cannot be equal to 0. So that gets rid of those two. Then we know x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. That gets rid of that one. And also x plus 3 cannot be equal to 0. So then we need to go ahead and solve these. So we add 4 to both sides and we get that x cannot be 4. Add 2 to both sides, we get that x cannot be 2. Subtract 3 from both sides and we get that x cannot be negative 3. So all of these represent our excluded values for number 7. Let's take a look at number 8. There's no simplifying we can do in advance, so we're going to go straight to multiplying. So x minus 2 times x plus 6 divided by x minus 3 times x plus 9. And then we're going to flip the second fraction to be over so that we get rid of that division and we can multiply. And now that everything's being multiplied, we can cancel some stuff out. So we can cancel this and this. We can cancel this and this. So left up top is x plus 6. Left on the bottom is x minus 3. So now we need to go through and calculate out our excluded values. So to calculate out our excluded values, we need to take our original bottom, x minus 3 times x plus 9. That cannot be equal to 0. Our original bottom of our second also cannot be equal to 0, and our original top cannot be equal to 0. So when we go to write all of that out, okay, we know that x minus 3 cannot be equal to 0, x plus 9 cannot be equal to 0, and x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0. So all I did was set each of those factors to not equal 0 once. So then x cannot be 3, negative 9, or 2. For number 8. Let's take a look at number 9. So now we want to go ahead and simplify number 9. So when we simplify number 9, what we want to do is cancel out any factors that we can in each fraction, which we can't right now. So I'm going to go straight to multiplying. So I have x minus 3 times x plus 12 divided by x minus 2 times x minus 4. Now I'm going to flip that second fraction so that I'm multiplying and not dividing. So I have x plus 4, or x minus 4 times x plus 9 up top. And then I have x minus 3 times x plus 4 now on the bottom. So since all of this is being multiplied, I need to cancel out some factors. So I can cancel out x minus 3, and I can cancel out x minus 4. So left up top, I have x plus 12 and x plus 9. Left on the bottom, I have x minus 2 times x plus 4. So what we need to do now is we can't just leave our answer like this. We have to actually use the box method to get it solved out. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I'm going to multiply x plus 12 and x plus 9 as such. X times x is x squared. 12 times x is 12x. 9 times x is 9x, and 12 times 9 is 108. So I write out those terms, and I have x squared plus 12x plus 9x plus 108. Then I need to go through and I need to add those middle two terms. So I get x squared. 12x plus 9x is 21x plus 108. So that's my top. Let's go ahead and multiply out the bottom. So we're multiplying x minus 2 and x plus 4. X times x is x squared. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. 4 times x is 4x. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8. So I get x squared minus 2x plus 4x minus 8. So add these middle two terms together and you get x squared plus 2x minus 8. So now we need to write these as fractions over themselves. So I have x squared plus 4x plus 108 divided by x squared plus 2x minus 8. Now this is your simplified rational expression right here. You can't break that down anymore. So next, let's go ahead and let's take care of our excluded values. So for our excluded values, we know that x minus 2, x minus 4 cannot equal 0. X minus 4 cannot equal 0. Oops, sorry, wrong part. X minus 4 times x plus 9 cannot equal 0, bottom of our second fraction, and then top of our third fraction. Top of our second fraction. There we go. So then we have that x minus 2 cannot be equal to 0, x minus 4 cannot be equal to 0, x minus 3 cannot be equal to 0, and x plus 4 cannot be equal to 0. Oops, I forgot x plus 9, and also x plus 9 cannot be equal to 0. So I took each of these, and I said that they cannot be equal to 0. So when you solve each of those equations, you get that x cannot be 2, 4, 3, negative 4, or negative 9 for your excluded values. All right, last but not least, let's take a look now at number 10. And you know what? Since this video is already getting long, we'll call number 10 good since we already did number 9. You do not have to do number 10 unless you want to do it on your own for extra credit. Otherwise, that concludes your note video for today. Thanks for listening.